All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for opening. It's another Med Talk today. If you don't know me, my name is Ryan Samanyema. I'm a radiography medical student in my third year, soon to be in fourth year. And apart from my medical studies, I'm also a proficient freelance medical content writer. I do a lot of writings on medical articles, medical blog content, medical educational materials, patient care materials, and etc. And also write social media content for a couple of clients I've worked with. So today I have an amazing guest speaker today. Hey Shakira, could you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi everyone, my name is Shakira Rivera, and I'm a second year medical student currently studying for Step 1, the USMLE, and soon to be MS3.
Amazing, amazing. So we have a couple of questions for you to answer for the public. You ready?
Yes.
All right, so if I'm looking downwards, I'm reading the questions to Shakira to answer. All right, so you've been wondering what's Ryan I'm looking downwards for. So the first question goes this way: how has your medical education as a Latina medical student studying for your Step 1 exams currently affected the way you're educated in the medical community? So tell us.
So this is a great question, especially being a first generation college graduate, high school graduate, first one in my family to do anything. So being able to break down barriers, especially in the high school that I went to, I was expected to not go to college. I was expected to go get married and have children, but I decided I needed to break barriers because my mother was sick when I was younger. And being able to break those barriers and having a physician that looks like you, that can understand you, and speak your language is super important, especially for patient care. Being a Latina and studying medicine, I have seen there's so many disparities, especially from the patient side and from the doctor side. And my education from and my upbringing has taught me that I need to bring my cultural competency to be able to learn more in medicine. I can't hear you.
Okay, do you think that your transition from your country to the country you're in right now, the United States of America, talk about that transition. How did it affect your life and your studies?
So I currently go to school in St. Martin. So I am an international medical graduate as well. But I was born in the United States. But my parents are Hispanic and Latino. My mom is Cuban and my dad is Puerto Rican. So my upbringing was all in Spanish. So when I read and when I learn, everything is Spanish, and I have to translate it to myself into English, especially when taking exams. And that's something that's very difficult to do, especially having to think in a different language and translate it. And my upbringing was one of like an immigrant, that my parents didn't know English. They didn't know the process, how the medical things are, how anything works, especially with school. So having to self-teach myself and guide and break the pathway for my younger sister and for myself is one of the things that is very difficult to do, but it's very doable.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Shakir, for talking about how the medical education as a Latino, medical student studying for your Step 1 has really affected you, the way you're being educated in the medical community. So before I go into the second question for you, you mentioned about you know, s- you know, s- teaching yourself, homeschooling for yourself. So how was that possible for you? Are there materials you use to learn like other languages like English? Are there materials you use to learn it?
So learning English, so my first language is Spanish. And then I learned English through the ESOL, English as a Second Language program in school. So all throughout elementary school and then transitioning into middle school. And then I was soon taken off the program because I was able to speak English fluently and everything. Um, so having to learn, especially I remember vividly as a child, I had math homework and my mom couldn't help me. So having to think, okay, how do I say this to my mom who doesn't know English? How do I say this to Spanish? So it's always learning those barriers, especially as a child, has what made me where I am today, especially like learning in medical school. I use a lot of outside resources to help me guide my way, especially for the USMLE, which is one of the most rigorous exams there is.
Amazing, amazing. So, do your parents speak English right now?
No, they do not.
Wow. Okay. How about you teach them? What do you think about that?
So it's very difficult, especially they are older now. And my mom did obviously try to learn English, but it's very difficult, especially having to maintain a job to support me, my younger sister. And when you're a child, it's very difficult to have to go to English school and work full time to upbring two children in an economy like in the United States.
Okay. Thank you so much for explaining that first, Shakir. So that draws me to the second question. So, can you share some thoughts about your journey to prepare for step one, particularly the strategies you have found to be effective during your current training period? Tell us how you're preparing for your step one and the strategies you've found to be helpful and effective during your current training period. So tell us.
Okay. So, one thing that I've noticed is exam test taking strategies. And that's one of the most hardest things, especially when you are a minority and you are of the lowest socioeconomic status, especially as a child. And being upbringing in that community and in that status does put you a little bit more behind. And that's something that I've noticed, and I've talked with other Latino medical students that have also experienced this, because it's not the same when you are able to have tutoring as a child, know how to take exams. Because I struggled with the SATs, ACTs. I struggled every single time. Yes, I did well. I excelled in school, but those standardized exams are very difficult. And if you do not know how to analyze a question, that's where everything gets crazy. And especially with the USMLE. I recently took the MBME CBSC. That is a standardized exam from NBME that tells you your status on how close that you can pass and the percentages on the material that you know. And I passed on my first try, which is my school requires it in order to sit for the step one. So I took the exam and I passed. And my most important thing is test taking strategies. And that was one of the things that I had to learn the hard way, because at the end of the day, the examiners want you to pick one answer, and the answer is right in front of you. As sad as it's there, you think, oh my goodness, I don't know the answer, but the answer is right in front of you. And I've heard it a million times. My mom tells me the same thing, and she doesn't know anything about medicine. She's like, but the answer is right in front of you. I'm like, yes, I know. But do you know how many diseases, how many enzymes, how many medicines I need to know to get to that answer? It's crazy. Especially when
Absolutely.
questions are like a paragraph and you're like, oh my goodness, I do not know. Where do I start? And that's one of the hardest things. So my preparation to be able to pass that rigorous exam, which was 200 questions, and it had the same format as percentages, like the step one, was using outside resources. Using outside resources since I started medical school was one of the best things. And also the first aid book. I did the horrendous thing of not using my first aid book as I should have. And now that I've really dug into it, I was like, oh my goodness, there's so many great things in this book. And that's why they call it the medical student Bible. And you have to have it attached to you because it's everything is there, essentially. So when taking this exam, it's mostly test taking strategies. And that's something that I've had to learn over the last month because I was studying for the exam for a month. And now I'm transitioning over to USMLE and I'm continuing to work on those test taking strategies and my testing anxiety. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with is, oh my goodness, I need to do well. And you get so anxious and you freak out. And it's so hard, but you have to take a step back, breathe. It's going to be okay. I know it's so hard to hear that, but it's going to be okay.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely it's gonna be okay. I love the strategies you're putting in place to study for your step one, which is amazing, really, really amazing. So you talked about there is exam in your school that you have to take that determines you on your preparation for step one, right? Is that paramount to other medical schools in the US?
So after, I'm from the beginning of time, I just thought it was a my school thing. But apparently, after speaking with a lot of students from the United States and other Caribbean and other IMGs, their schools would require it. So their USMLE ranking doesn't go down, and to keep track of how their students are doing in preparation for these board exams.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that for us. So that draws us to the third question. So, what advice do you have for other first generational medical students out there who may face the challenges of balancing academic demands with personal and cultural expectation? Because I know that you are the first generation of medical students, especially in your family, which is really, really amazing. So, what are your advice for them?
So my biggest advice, and especially as a Latina, you're always expected from your family, oh, I need help with this, or help me translate this document. And it's always so difficult because you obviously want to put yourself first, but you can't because you always have others to help. And that's almost like, oh, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to help people. But sometimes you have to take a step back and think, why do I want to do this? I want to do this for me, my future, my future family, my current family. So breaking generational curses, it's one of the biggest things is taking a step back. Okay. And you need to have those tough conversations. It's very difficult to have with your parents and telling them, hi, like you do not understand how difficult medical school is. We have to sit down 12 hours a day, sit, learn, memorize, and retain all that information for the rest of the time. And it's very difficult. And having those conversations, as hard as it is, you have to do it in order to break those generational curses to be able to excel, especially as a first gen. Because breaking down barriers is the first thing that all of us have to do. We don't want to be another statistic, and that's one of the things that I had to learn. I didn't want to be another statistic. I knew that I wanted to excel. I knew that I wanted to be bigger and better every single day with learning, with connecting with others, making new connections. Leveling up every single time is what's going to put you ahead and it's going to put you above and you're going to stand out in the crowd of many.
That's amazing. Really, really amazing. I love that nugget you dropped, and I believe that all the medical students and viewers out there, will greatly, adore you for that. But I want to ask you a question before I move to the fourth question.
Mhm.
You know, I I understood everything you just said about, how people can balance academic demands with the personal and cultural expectations. So, in what you just said, does it determine to other medical students, probably in my country, Nigeria?
Mhm.
Do you have any nuggets for them as well? In
I just
Africa in general, not from in Europe or North America, to tell us.
I currently do not know anything about other medical students in other countries, but
Yeah,
I know that family is one of the most important things, at least in the Latino and in a lot of cultures. Family is very important. It's your upbringing, it's who you are. Because if it wasn't for your mom and your dad, you wouldn't be here today. So
yeah,
even being able to have those conversations in whatever culture is very important because it's also for your well-being. Because with this high stakes career that we're studying so much and having almost like another load, another pressure of having to do all these extra things is very difficult. So it's
absolutely.
always the psychology and thinking and like, okay, we need to sit down and have this conversation and break those curses because at the end of the day, first gens have to do it all themselves and pave the way and then be able to guide others to get there. Because I know there's probably somebody in undergrad that wants to be a doctor and they're a first gen as well. And they look for others to guide them and like, okay, how did you do this? How should I study? And that's the beauty of social media is you're able to share all these things and connect with others and mentor them, especially in this career.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I forgot to ask you a question. What is your specialization in medicine?
So I want to be a cardiologist.
Well, why do you want to be a cardiologist?
So that's actually a funny story. So my grandmother was very sick and she was from Cuba. And when she was very older, we were able to get her from Cuba to the United States. And I was her medical proxy and I was the one doing everything for her. And I knew nothing
Yeah,
about medicine. And I would have to translate all these difficult things from doctors to my mom and follow through and see what was the best care we could do for my grandmother. And one day I got a job as a medical scribe, so the person who makes doctor's notes and follows the doctor around. And I wanted to work in the ER. And the company was like, no, we need somebody in the cardiology office. I'm like, okay, like I'm still gonna learn. And the first day that I went to go work, they kicked me out of the office. The doctor was like, I'm not gonna work with a scribe. You go figure it out. And I was like, okay. And the next day I went in and the doctor came looking for me. He's like, okay, you have one patient to prove yourself. I said, don't worry, I got this. And I went, did the chart, and the doctor was like, wow, like I didn't know how efficient this is. You're very smart, you're very intelligent. You're gonna be a cardiologist. I was like, I don't think so, but okay, like I really like this, I really like the environment. We'll see. I worked with him for 5 years before coming to medical school, but he taught me everything. He would make me round with residents. I was always with the medical students. I knew how to chart, I knew how to present patients, and he literally changed my life. And a couple years before coming to medical school, my grandfather was very ill in Cuba. And as we know, there's a lot of things happening in Cuba, and there's no medicines, no medical supplies. A lot of bad things are happening over there. And my mother was like, okay, this is one of the last times you're probably going to see your grandfather. You should go with your sister. So we did. And I took my stethoscope that I had for a couple years. And I was like, okay, I don't know if I'm going to need this, but I'm going to take it. And my grandfather was having an active stroke. And there was no doctors, there's no cars to go to the hospital. It was a disaster. And I diagnosed my grandfather with atrial fibrillation. And I knew nothing about medicine. All I knew was how to be a scribe and how to do a physical exam that my mentor taught me. And just being able to diagnose the atrial fibrillation with my stethoscope, I was like, okay, this is serious. We need to figure this out. We need to get it moving. And we found a way to get a car to take us to a hospital because there is no ambulances. There's not even aspirin. We brought aspirin from the United States to Cuba. And even then, the situation just kept getting worse. So that was one of the other factors that was like, I want to be a cardiologist. I don't want this to keep happening to my people, to because it's in our blood. And being able to help others, especially in the master organ, the heart, is what drives me to cardiology.
hello.
Hello? Oh, it froze. It had gone away. Could you hear me?
Sure, sure. You can continue what you're saying.
Oh, what? Where did I leave off? Because I finished talking and then it froze.
Yeah, you were talking about from transferring aspirin from the United States to Cuba. Yeah, I think
Yes.
is that.
So even taking the
I,
aspirin from the United States to Cuba is it was difficult, but just being able to do that with diagnosing my grandfather, just knowing the bare minimum, it was what really sparked it. And I was like, okay, I want to be a cardiologist. It's in my blood. I know that this is what I want to do, especially being the master of the human body, the heart, and taking care of the heart.
well, you're gonna do well in your cardiology specialty. You know why? Because you have a prior experience for it. You've been getting gathering some experiences in that aspect. So that means you're gonna do well in that field. And I wish you the best as well. I wish you the best.
Thank you.
And I make keep improving the lives of your people. It's gonna be an amazing, amazing stuff. So,
Yeah.
um, the fourth question for you goes this way: how do you think healthcare organizations can support recruiting and retaining minorities, sorry, in medicine? So, what are your take on that?
So my biggest thing is cultural competency training. A lot of problems that happen in minorities is due to the lack of knowledge and just thinking that this is the patient is a statistic, or you're biased towards the patient, especially cultural bias. And that's something that is very difficult, especially when you have differences in the cultures between physicians, residents, nurses, and the patient. So being able to have those trainings with physicians and medical professionals will help the medical outcomes of these patients, especially knowing that a lot of patients from experience that they do not know why they're taking certain medications. They do not know their diagnoses. Like, yes, they went to a doctor, but they don't know the significance or the severity of their diagnoses. So if a patient is a diabetic and they stop taking their medicines, oh, I didn't know. I just thought I had high blood sugar and that was it. And even having those conversations with patients about diet, their medicine, their culture is very important, because once you understand how a patient is, like their type of job, where they live, all these things play a factor in their overall health. Because if the patient does not have access or the sufficient funds to have insurance to purchase their medicines, those things affect health outcomes significantly. And it's very important to address these things with the patient. So having the cultural competency training to be able to understand how these things affect patients will 100% fix healthcare disparities in the healthcare world.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Wow, amazing. That was an amazing answer to that question. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So the fifth question goes this way. As a Latino doctor in training, right? How do you prioritize self-care and maintaining a healthy work life balance amidst the challenges of, your medical training? We all know that going, like you said, medical school is a very difficult thing to do. That's the sad truth, really the sad truth. But that's the truth. The medical school is really, really very difficult. So tell us how you know, got the opportunity to prioritize self care and maintaining a healthy work life balance. So tell us.
It's actually very difficult, and I struggle with that in the beginning of medical school, because you always have this mentality, especially when you're in undergrad and even in high school. You say, I'm going to be happy when I get into college. And then the next thing is, I'm going to be happy when I pass my classes. I'm going to be happy when I into medical school. And then when you're here, you're like, I'll be happy when I pass, take step, and I'm a doctor. And it's so true. Why are we not happy currently? Because we're here today. We have one day of life that some other people didn't have. And it's very difficult to even like break those chains that we create ourselves. So my form of self care is going back to my roots and my family, and having those conversations, and just even FaceTime, because I'm in a different country from my family, and the only way that I can communicate with them is through FaceTime. And even having dinner dates on the phone, and they're eating in their house and I'm eating over here. Those little things, it just makes it feel like home. And especially when you're alone and you're tired and you just want to go to sleep. Sometimes you just want to kick it with your family over the phone, or just little things like that. My biggest thing is social media. I was struggling very hard here, especially living alone, living with family always. And I was like, okay, I'm going to make a social media account, because I'm sure there's other people that feel the same way like I do. And I want them to have that experience and know what to expect, because this is very difficult. All the people that I knew beforehand coming here, most of them go to US medical school, so they can travel easily to go back home. They can go to a regular supermarket. Here I go to a very tiny supermarket. So just those little things that I learned from them is way different than students that come to a different country to study medicine.
Yeah, yeah. So wait, hold on a minute. How was the medical application process for you? Because there are people who are going to watch this video that intending to, apply to medical schools out there. So how did the application process, for you, and what are the challenges you faced, and the school you studied your cardiology for, preparing for your step one. So tell us.
So for this application, the U.S. medical system uses an AMCAS program. So if you already started a process with an AMCAS, you can transfer that information to my school's application process. And then there's a
Yeah,
separate application that you can do. That's the one that I did because I didn't have an AMCAS account. So I submitted all my information, and I feel like one of the hardest things that I did, like had to go through, was getting my letters of recommendation. They required one educational one and one from physicians or a professional letter. And my hardest one
yeah,
was an education letter because there's so many years I was on my year and a half gap year and having to contact my professors and tell them, hey, can I get a letter of recommendation? They're like, I don't remember you. And I'm like, but I remember you. And it's so hard to like even get those letters. That was one of my hardest things. But getting the professional letter for me was super easy. So my biggest thing for people who want to apply to medical school and you're in the US, get those jobs as a scribe. 100%. If you're a scribe, you make such amazing connections with doctors, with residents. You never know who you're going to meet and who will get you into the door to medical school. So
absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely.
So having those conversations with people and making connections, 100% the best.
That's amazing. So we have the last question for you, Shakira. So, can you share an education and memory you've had in the past, and how it affected your perspective on medical education? So tell us.
So coming here was a different ball game. I was used to having my quizzes, my exams from undergrad, and you just knew the material and that's it. Here it's application. And that was one of the things I struggled with the most. And how to analyze questions, how to take exams. Because I did not take the MCAT. And that's a requirement for a lot of medical schools. But due to the COVID situation that happened a couple years ago, I could not take the MCAT. So having to learn how to take an exam was one of the hardest things that I had to go through. Transitioning from high school to college, and in college, learning how to handle those exams, finishing off well, and then having to restart from zero and learning everything once again. And like, okay, how do I analyze a patient's labs? How do I read this paragraph, analyze it, and see what's going on to diagnose the patient? So it's one of the hardest things that I had to like go through, especially my first year, and breaking those chains and just learning how to navigate the process of medical school towards the USMLE.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Wow, we've come to the end of the session, Shakir. You've been an amazing, amazing guest speaker thus far. And before we wrap up the session, so what are your last words for the audience?
My last words for the audience, it was a pleasure to speak with you all today. If you have any questions or anything in regards to coming to my university, which is American University of the Caribbean, feel free to send me an email or message me. We are here to pave the way for first gens that want to become physicians or anything in the medical profession. We want you to strive to be better. We want you to be those great doctors for our community and our people.
Amazing. So if you love this content, do well to, subscribe, like, and share and comment and share to your network. Hopefully somewhere in your network will definitely adore this video. Thank you so much, Shakir.
Thank you so much, Ransom, for having me today.
Yeah, you're welcome.